Ladies and gentlemen, scumbags and saints, gather round because we're diving into one of the slickest, slipperiest, most seductive creations in the legal underworld, the shell company. It's that elusive concept that sounds like a scam, but get this, it's totally legal. Now you're probably thinking, Saul, what the heck is a shell company? Is it a company that actually does something, or is it just a tax loophole dressed up in a nice suit? Well, that's what I'm here to break down for you. Let's start with the basics. A shell company is a business entity that exists on paper but does not conduct actual operations. No employees, no products, no storefront. It's essentially a business without a business. You know, like a ghost, but one that can still get you a tax break and some nice offshore real estate. Now, don't get all legalistic on me. There's nothing illegal about setting up a shell company. It's like buying a house in a neighborhood where they don't have too many questions about who actually owns the place. Your money is tucked away somewhere, and the government has a hard time following the trail. Why set one up? Here's the million-dollar question. Why would anyone want a company that doesn't actually do anything? Well, it's all about control, baby. You can own things through your shell companies. Things you don't want your neighbor or the IRS to know about. Things like property, intellectual property, bank accounts, you name it. Let's say you're a real estate mogul and you want to keep your property ownership under wraps. Instead of registering a personal name on the deed, you set up a shell company. That way your name stays out of public records. No one needs to know you're the one who owns that luxurious penthouse in downtown Manhattan or that beach house in Malibu. It's all through a legal entity. But there's more. A shell company can even own other companies. It's like nesting dolls for your finances. One shell company can own another shell company, and that one can own a bank account in the Bahamas. It's a sweet deal, huh? The more layers you add, the harder it is for anyone to figure out what's going on behind the curtain. And here's the best part, tax optimization. Oh yeah, baby. If you register your shell company in a country with low or no taxes, say the Cayman Islands or Luxembourg, you could find yourself paying way less in taxes on that sweet, sweet passive income. Let's talk about jurisdictions. To make a shell company work, you need to understand jurisdictions. Some countries are far more friendly to shell companies than others. Take Delaware, for example. Delaware's laws are so lax that you can create a corporation there with minimal information, no need to provide a director's name or prove your existence. It's like Vegas for corporations. You do your business in Delaware and nobody has to know a thing about your company's inner workings. It's basically the Bermuda Triangle of business law. From Delaware, you can expand internationally. Your Delaware shell can own a company in Panama, and that Panamanian company, it can own a bank account in Switzerland. The more obscure the jurisdictions, the harder it is for tax authorities to track down where the money is going. So far, so good, right? A shell company is a legal structure that's entirely above board. But remember, I said legal. It's only illegal if you use it to conceal criminal activity like money laundering or hiding stolen goods. Simply using a shell company for asset protection, reducing your tax burden, or keeping your business activities under wraps is all part of the game, and I'm here to show you how to play it. Now that we've covered the basics of how shell companies work, let's dive into some real-life examples where they've been used in the wild. Don't worry, I won't name any specific companies, after all it's all educational. But let's just say that these are big names in the financial world who've used shell companies for some pretty slick maneuvers. The Panama Papers. Perhaps one of the most famous cases of shell company use is the infamous Panama Papers leak. In 2016, journalists uncovered a massive collection of documents from the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca. These documents revealed how wealthy individuals, politicians, and companies use shell companies to hide assets, avoid taxes, and obscure financial transactions. It was a massive scandal, but the use of shell companies wasn't illegal. In fact, it was all done through legal structures and obscure tax havens. The leak showed how politicians from all corners of the globe had shell companies in countries like Panama and the British Virgin Islands, which allowed them to shield their assets from public scrutiny and reduce their tax burdens. A lot of people got their feathers ruffled over this, but the fact remains they played the game by the rules. Shell companies let them do what they did, but it wasn't a crime until someone got too greedy. The Paradise Papers, another bombshell leak. The Paradise Papers revealed how some of the world's richest individuals used offshore shell companies to stash their wealth, from Hollywood moguls to royalty. The documents showed how these elites were using offshore shell companies to funnel money through countries with little to no taxes. But once again, what they did wasn't exactly illegal. They just knew how to work the system. Let's say you're a billionaire film producer and you want to keep your profits from your latest blockbuster movie out of the prying eyes of tax authorities. You could set up a shell company in the Cayman Islands, funnel all the royalties into that shell company, and keep your money out of reach from both tax authorities and those pesky ex-wives demanding half your fortune. This is the kind of strategic thinking that makes shell companies so popular with high net worth individuals. Apple's use of shell companies for tax optimization think a company like Apple doesn't have an army of accountants and lawyers keeping them out of the IRS's reach? Think again. Apple, the tech giant, has used shell companies as part of its elaborate strategy to reduce its tax burden. They've set up shell companies in Ireland and other low-tax jurisdictions, allowing them to route profits through these entities to avoid paying billions in U.S. taxes. How does it work? Let's say Apple sells an iPhone in the US, they can set up a shell company in Ireland, transfer the profits to that company, and pay Irish taxes instead of US taxes. Since Ireland's tax rates are much lower, Apple's effectively reducing its tax liability without breaking any laws. They're simply exploiting loopholes in jurisdictions that are favorable to them. These real-world examples show how shell companies can be used for tax avoidance and asset protection on a massive scale. But it's not just the rich and powerful who use them. Small business owners and entrepreneurs can use these same strategies to protect their assets and minimize their tax burden, legally of course. Now, if you're still with me, you're probably thinking, alright Saul, tell me how I can set up my own shell company. Well, I'm not going to hold your hand and walk you through every legal step because that would be too much fun, but I'll give you a good idea of how it works. Step 1. Choose a jurisdiction. The first thing you need to do is pick a jurisdiction. And no, I'm not talking about the one where you grew up. You need a place where regulations are favorable to shell companies. Jurisdictions like Delaware, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Luxembourg, or the Cayman Islands. These places have laws that make it easy to set up shell companies without too much red tape. Step 2. Register your company. Next, you'll need to register your company. This usually involves working with a local agent or law firm who can help you file the necessary paperwork. Depending on the jurisdiction, you may only need to provide minimal information. In Delaware, for example, you don't need to list your name or provide proof of residency. It's like registering an online account for your business, and you don't even have to leave your couch. Step 3. Set up the structure. Once your company is registered, you need to figure out its structure. Will it be a single shell company, or will you set up a chain of entities? Maybe you'll create one in Delaware, another in Panama, and a third in Switzerland. Each shell can own assets including bank accounts, property, and intellectual property. The more layers, the more difficult it is for anyone to trace the money back to you. Step 4. Nominee directors and shareholders. If you want to keep your identity under wraps, you can use nominee directors and shareholders. These are people who are listed as the official directors or shareholders of the company, but they're not really the ones in charge. You stay behind the scenes pulling the strings while they sign the documents and get their names on the public record. It's the perfect way to keep your involvement in the company hidden. Step 5. Maintain the paper trail. Remember, you can't just forget about your shell company once it's set up. You need to maintain a paper trail. Keep records of all transactions, sign contracts, and file annual reports if required. This keeps the company in good standing and ensures that it remains legitimate in the eyes of the law. This is just a taste of how shell companies work, real-world examples of how they're used, and the basics of how to set one up. Stay tuned for the next installment where we'll dive even deeper into how to use these entities to legally stash your wealth, avoid taxes, and keep your assets safe from the long arm of the law. Until then, keep it mostly legal, and as always, call Saul Goodman if you need help navigating the murky waters of the financial world.